Hello and welcome to YouTube channel Health Q, the place where our mission is not only to motivate you but help you to move on to the brighter side of the health. We want that any individual who is suffering from any impairment that impacts the person's mobility, functioning, or else quality of life should be able to move better by having better understanding and awareness about the conditions as well as problems that could impact it. And that's why we have come up with this educational series of podcasts and interviews that you can expect coming up in this channel in future, where you will understand in detail, in depth, in deep dive way what is the basics of movement and how it impacts your quality of life. So that's why I'm here today to give you a quick anatomy lesson, because today's topic is neuroscience of movement. You should know how you move, because when you know that, you will be able to correlate so much about why certain movements are so easy, and when you are in pain or when you have any sort of impairment, these movements gets affected, these movements get impaired, and you experience something called as restricted mobility or pain. So let's deep dive. So as I said, every movement that we do, even the minutest of all, is controlled by your brain, or else you can say central nervous system. That's why it is important to understand how your central nervous system functions when you are making a minutest of movement. And in order to understand that, the first thing that we should know is the overview of your central nervous system. Now, if we look at our entire body, it has something called as musculoskeletal system, which means muscles and bones. But the controller of this musculoskeletal system is the central nervous system. Central nervous system is like a CPU of your body. It comprises of your brain and your spinal cord. Now, when I say brain and spinal cord, it still have lot of multiple units which altogether forms your central nervous system. Central nervous system can further be divided into peripheral nervous system and central nervous system. So when I say peripheral nervous system, it basically comprises of your nerves and the nerve endings, and central nervous system basically comprises of your brain and your spinal cord. So let's first deep dive and understand each and every structure and its function when it comes to your overall movement science. So here I would like to talk about the first and the most important aspect of our human being, and that is our brain. So the reason why humans are more powerful, have got better abilities compared to other living beings or other living creatures, is because of the brain size. So if we compare the brain size of human, it's way more heavier compared to other animals, and we all know that. So when I talk about brain, it can be further divided into other parts. So let me first talk about cerebral cortex. Cerebral cortex is nothing but the most important or is the heaviest structure of the brain. The cerebral cortex are divided in two parts, the left cerebral hemisphere and the right cerebral hemisphere. This is again divided into three parts: the frontal cortex, the middle or parietal cortex, the backward is the occipital cortex, and on the sides there is something called as temporal cortex. Now all of these areas have different functions. Cerebral cortex comes when we talk about the hierarchy or else the control ability of the entire human being. Cerebral cortex comes in the highest hierarchy. It is the most important decision maker in the body, and all the fine minute tasks that you do, all the adjustments that are happening, all the thinking that is happening, all the cognition that is coming, all the movements that are coming, the highest center that controls these things is controlled by cerebral hemisphere. As I said, the cerebral hemisphere has got these areas, and these areas have got different functions. So when I talk about the frontal cortex, the front part of the brain, it is basically also called as your motor cortex, or is where the movement is defined and the movement is planned. Then there is something called as prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex is also the area where the brain is having maps embedded into it. So whenever you are doing some movements in different areas of the body, these areas in the brain gets fired or gets lightened. So that's what is the function of the motor cortex. After motor cortex, the second thing that comes is the parietal lobe, or is the middle part. Now this is more towards the sensory function. All the sensations that we feel in our body is controlled at parietal lobe. So that's why it is also called as sensory cortex. So all the sensations are processed, made sense of, and sends signals to the motor areas from where the command of execution is going. When it comes to occipital lobe, or else occipital cortex, which is at the behind, this is basically responsible for vision and the sensations that we get from our peripheral sensory organs, right? So our vision, our coordination, these are the things which are controlled by your occipital cortex. And then comes your temporal lobe, which is on the side of your brain. This temporal lobe basically is concerned with the movements, or else from the sensations coming from your auditory, or else you can say hearing sensation. It is also very much crucially important for your balance. Now, I am not going to go very deep into these structures, but would like to give an overview, and that's why this is the way with which you can understand how your brain is structured or is divided into. Now, apart from these structures which I said, which was your frontal cortex, your parietal lobe, your occipital lobe, your temporal lobe, there is one more structure that is also the part of your brain, or else your cerebral hemisphere. And that structure is called as basal ganglia. As the name suggests, basal ganglia, this is something, it's you can say it is a type of a bundle of all these brain areas collecting together at the base of the skull. As the name of the structure itself says basal, so ganglia means bundle and structure, or the basal is the base of the brain. So this is a structure which lies at the base of your brain. What basal ganglia do is, basal ganglia will take information from all the cerebral hemisphere which I spoke about previously, and will process and send the signals back, or else sends the commands back to the body. So in simple terms, basal ganglia will collect all the information, will process the information, and sends this information back to the areas where they are supposed to go. This all process basal ganglia will do via a structure called as thalamus. Hence, basal ganglia can also be called as a strategist or motor strategist in the body. So where cerebral hemisphere is the collector of all the information, these collections then goes to basal ganglia. Basal ganglia act as a strategist and makes strategy of movement, and then sends back the commands, the signals to the different areas of the body. And that's how the highest hierarchy of the central nervous system functions. Now let's move on to the lower level hierarchy from top to bottom. So the next structure that comes into the picture here is the cerebellum. Now, as I said, cerebellum is a structure which is lying below the brain and backside of the brain. This is an adjuster, or else you can say modifier. Cerebellum has no role in sending direct commands to any movements, but it is someone who is responsible for fine-tuning the action. So let me give you an example. Let's say if there is a glass of water in front of me, and I have a roadblock to reach out to this glass. Now when this is there, I know I have to take my hand down. So this is the straight pathway from where I will do this movement. So my brain is telling me that I have to go and pick up this glass, and the brain also makes this plan, okay, how am I going to do, right? Or how am I going to do or go? Now the commands from cerebellum will make sure that my hand passes below this rod to pick up this glass. So this fine tuning of action which happened was because of cerebellum. So cerebellum is a structure that lies behind your brainstem. What is brainstem? We will come to that in just some time. Cerebellum is a structure which will receive inputs not only from your brain but also from your spinal cord. It will be the one which will adjust the motor response and give a adjusted or else more fine-tuned results. So people who have got problem with cerebellum usually don't have problem in doing the movements, but they have problem with coordination of the movements. So they will observe that their movements somewhere are not happening in the right way as they are supposed to happen. That's why cerebellum is someone which will make modification in the way you move, in the way the range of motion happens, in the way you apply force to an area of the body. So all of these things are controlled by cerebellum. So now let's move on to brainstem. So as the name suggests, brainstem. So let's consider if your brain is like the top of the tree, and then if the tree is coming down, the stem that is formed immediately below the tree is called as brainstem, right? So brainstem, as the name suggests, is the stem of your central nervous system. Brainstem basically is involved in controlling your posture. So how your posture is, whether you are sitting erect, whether you are sitting forward bend, or whether you are twisting your body, all of these postures are being controlled by your brainstem. Even when you are moving, how your body is moving, the way your body moves, the way you walk, the way you sit, the way you stand, all of those things are controlled by your brainstem. Now brainstem is a structure which is a combination of different structures. Now let's not go very deep into these structures because then it will become a very lengthy video, but just consider brainstem as a place which controls your posture and your mobility. Now brainstem, what it does, it has some information which is coming from the peripheral of your body, or as you can see, your hands, your back, your lower back, your legs. So all the sensory information from the sensory nerve comes to the brainstem area, goes to the cerebral cortex. Cerebral cortex do the processing work. From there goes to the motor strategist, which is your basal ganglia, which I just mentioned. From basal ganglia, it will reach to the brainstem, where the brainstem will send the commands of postural control, that okay, this is how you have to sit, this is how you have to walk, this is how you have to move. So all of those things are controlled by your brainstem. So brainstem have got all the pathways or else information coming from the body, and also have the motor pathways or else the processed information going back towards the body. So brainstem is like that road in middle, or else it's like a highway from where all the vehicles, all the information is passing by. Brainstem basically receives its input from your skin, from your muscles, from your joints, from the vestibular system, or else the position of head in space, as well as from your proprioceptors. Brainstem is a structure which sends the information back specifically to your neck, to your face, and to your eyes. Brainstem also have a very critical function when it comes to your hearing and taste. So all the taste and the hearing sensations that we get are being somewhere processed at the brainstem level. Also, brainstem has got a very crucial role in your awareness as well as your arousal level. So people who have got stroke or else who have got brain injuries, and if the brainstem is impacted, then they will be having damaged in this area, and they will face trouble in the arousal level. So they might be in semi-comatose state or in a less alert state, right? And they will also have difficulty in understanding stuff, making sense of the stuff. So that's why stroke patients, brain injury patients with damage in this area might be in semi-coma or coma stage. So this is what the neuroscience of movement helps you to understand, and helps us as physiotherapists to correlate with which area of the brain could be affected when this injury has happened, and how that will be manifested in a physical appearance in a patient. Now we saw about your cerebral hemisphere, we spoke about basal ganglia, we spoke about brainstem, we spoke about cerebellum. Now let's talk about diencephalon. What is diencephalon? Now diencephalon is also a structure, a very important structure which is part of your central nervous system. Diencephalon basically composes or is a combination of two very important structure of the brain, which is called as thalamus and hypothalamus. Now this brain structures basically are the processor of the information. Now every information, every command that is coming, they will make sense out of it, and they will decode that information, and in a decoded manner will then send to other part of the body. So this decoding part happens at thalamus as well as hypothalamus area. The information that they decode are coming basically from your cerebral cortex, which I spoke about, the frontal, the parietal, the occipital, the temporal ones. They will also process or decode information from your cerebellum, as well as they will process and decode information from brainstem. Diencephalon will make sure that the right code of information goes to different areas of the central nervous system, or else the areas which are taking the movement or messages back to the body. So they have a very important role in the movement commands. So every movement we do is going from the sensory system to the brain, is being processed. After processing, comes back as an information or as a command which is being processed or is being decoded at diencephalon level. Now let's move on to the more peripheral area of the central nervous system, and that is spinal cord. Spinal cord is like a tube, a thick tube that starts from the base of your brain and goes till your lower back region, the spinal region. This spinal cord has got a thick center, and from there all these nerves that comes to our body gets originated. That's why central nervous system is incomplete without this spinal cord. The spinal cord is protected by our vertebral column, the bones that we have in our back region. So if we see from a hierarchical perspective, spinal cord comes under the lowest level in the hierarchy. It is the initial point of information processing. So all the sensory nerves, all the sensation that are being carried from our hands, our lower back region, our legs, all of them at first place is collected at spinal cord, and from there it is taken upward. They have also got certain level of control as well. So some basic movements like lifting of leg, kicking, or moving the leg front and back, this basic reflexive action are just being controlled at spinal cord level. They just don't go for the too much of processing at the higher centers. So some automatic actions that we do of leg front and back, or some reflexes that we have got, all of these things happens at spinal cord level. That's why whenever there is a damage to spinal cord, maybe due to a road traffic accident, due to which there is a spinal cord injury, or people who have got who are paraplegics, here their ability to move only below the level of the spinal cord will be gone. Okay, so for example, if the damage has happened at L4, L5 level, which is at the spinal level, all the functions below that is being controlled will be lost, because all the sensory information from there, the motor information, are getting blocked at this area. So from a sensory perspective, or from the sensation capturing perspective, sensation from your joints, from your muscles and from your skin is taken or captured at spinal cord level first, and then taken it upward. Even all the reflexive postures that we have got, all the reflexive actions that we make are also controlled at spinal cord level. The movements that happens or else are initiated from spinal cord are basically coming from motor neurons or else the nerve cells which are starting from spinal cord. Most of the time spinal cord show very stereotyped responses and not of very complex actions can be achieved. Now this was all about spinal cord. Now let's move on to the most basic unit of central nervous system, and that is a neuron. Neuron or is a nerve cell, right? Now nerve cell is the basic unit of central nervous system. Our brain is combination of different nerve cells. Our nerves are combination of different nerve cells. Our spinal cord is a combination of different nerve cells. So how is this neuron or is a nerve cell different from other cells in the body? Let's understand that. As I said, neuron is the basic unit of central nervous system. When we look at the hierarchy in which the function of central nervous system is arranged, in that at lowest level, at the most basic level, what comes is a neuron. Neuron have got some simple properties like resting potential, action potential and synaptic transmission, which means a cell when at rest is having some negative ions or some negative power inside it. Whenever there is an activation of the nerve, there will be an exchange of ions and there will be a change in the inner negative power to a positive power, due to which a depolarization will happen and electric changes will happen in the neuron, due to which an action potential or else an action will be initiated at this neuron. this action would be transmitted to the next neuron which is present after this single neuron, and that's how the signals from one neuron would be transmitted to other, from other there will be transmission to the third one, and that's how this entire electric circuit works of sending signals from the body to the brain, after processing comes back to the body again. So neuron basically also have two more important properties, which is called as synaptic facilitation and synaptic inhibition. Now what do I mean by that? Now whenever a neuron is fired again and again and again, right, then the synapse learn those patterns, right, and based on that it will also impact how this action potential, how strongly this contraction is happening. Is it happening very strongly or it becomes habituation? Now what is the real life role of these things? Let's say you are doing one action again and again of driving a car. Whenever you start learning to drive a car, it's a new action for you. The new neurons are being fired throughout your central nervous system, and that's why you will observe you are more alert, you are more tensed while driving the steering of the car, right? Why this is happening? Because here what is happening is synaptic facilitation or neuronal facilitation. The neurons are firing more than required and are taking help of the surrounding nerves as well to fire, because it's a new movement that it is trying to learn. Now when the same action, same level of firing is happening again and again and again, then it turns into synaptic inhibition, because now it has become so much encoded, so much practiced, that it has become hardwired in your prefrontal cortex, and that's why it does not need so much of focus, and that's why the neuron starts inhibiting the surrounding activations, because now it has become easy process, so it does not require that much level of firing, that much level of energy to do that same task. That's why whenever you are learning a new task, it is taking more attention of yours, more energy of yours, but same task when you are doing again and again, you become habituated. All the muscles that you are involving while doing the actions are getting less involved as it becomes habituated and becomes a very perfect movement, right? So that's how different structures of the brain work all together to give us movement. Now let's understand about how the systems all together work. Next system, somatosensory and primary and secondary control of movement. Now the most beautiful thing about human being is that human movements are controlled by two separate areas which are working in coordination with each other. So there is an hierarchical system, which means that the brain is the highest center which controls everything and defines a movement, and then there is a secondary or parallel system going on which is more horizontal in nature, which means different structures collaborate together and helps to give action. That's why when one way of function is affected, there are other areas of the brain, other areas of the body can easily take up the task of that similar thing, and we somehow adjust the movement and we are able to do a task, right? So that's why this is called as a hierarchical as well as a parallel control. This system allows us to give a lot of flexibility in our day-to-day life. Somehow we learn different movement patterns in order to finish a task. A simple example again. If there is a glass of water that is in front of me, now according to my regular brain center, it should be very simple that this is the straight way of picking a glass. But I can learn a different pattern of picking a glass, of coming from this side and taking it again, right? So here what happened is I used another method. How do I come to know? It's because of this parallel as well as the hierarchical center, which means that different brain areas learn to work in coordination with each other to make sure that a task is being complete. And that's where role of somatosensation as well as your somatomotor movements come into the picture, or somatosensory or motor control comes into the picture, which means your sensation determines your movement, and your movement will leave some feedback, some memories within your brain, which will have an influence in your future task or your future actions. How this works? Let's understand that. Now, currently, neuroscience believes that your sensory system or sensory control plays a very crucial role in your overall mobility. Somatosensory system works again in collaboration with other brain areas to make sure that the movement is happening. Now, when I talk about sensory or somatosensory system, the first structure that needs to be mentioned here are your peripheral receptors. Now, your peripheral receptors are nothing but the nerve endings which are the information grabbers from the environment. Peripheral receptors are present at your skin, present at your joint levels, present at your ears in different forms. Muscle spindle, intrafusal muscle fibers, Golgi tendon organs, group 1, group A neurons, C fibers, alpha beta fibers. These are the different type of peripheral receptors that are present in different parts of the body. These receptors capture information from the surroundings, from the body, and sends this information to the brain. The information that is captured from all these surroundings go to the brain for processing, and after processing, the movement pattern is defined and comes back via your motor nerves in the form of a movement. This modification happens at a spinal cord level, and thus spinal cord acts as a controller of your movement. How this spinal cord or brain does this processing, or is how this nerves or receptors or is this information reaches to the brain. These reaches through pathways or the paths. So these structures are like the open ends of wire which connects to the wire which is called as your nerves. These wires all together bundle together at a spinal cord level and reaches to the brain level, and they form tracts or else pathways. So there are two type of pathway again. One is called as ascending pathway, which means all the information that is around your surrounding is captured from these receptors, goes into this wire. These wires are ascending towards the brain, and that's why they are called as ascending pathways. So these are sensory pathways. Basically they are taking information from the environment and sending it to the brain. From there are something called as descending pathways, which means now the information is being processed. Brain has thought, okay, what is the movement that needs to be done, and from there this information is descending down, or it's coming down, turning it into the motor nerves, right, or it's the movement nerves, and a movement happens. So ascending pathways basically take information from your trunk, from your legs, and transfers it to your central cortex, or is the cerebral cortex, as well as cerebellum. This information is being processed at multiple level and fine-tuned, and decoding happens at the brainstem level, as I already mentioned, at thalamus level. Thalamus will collect all this information, will do the decoding, as well as it will come up with the movement strategy. What is the movement, or what is the response or reaction that needs to go post this, and then it sends back to the motor neuron. But along with this, there is also called as something as association cortex. So one was the cerebral cortex, the center area of the brain, and there is something called as association cortex, which are the parallel cortexes which are working together. This association cortex are located in your parietal lobe, or is the central part of the brain, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. So what are these systems doing? So they are taking help of other sensory system like your vision, your hearing, your taste sensation, your smell sensation. So these are all associative. So there is one touch information, there is some visual information that is going on which gives you info, right? But parallelly, the things that you are hearing, the commands that you are listening, all of these things are also being captured at these ascending levels, at this association cortex, which is being processed and is giving influence to the movement back. So this also has an impact, or else an influence from a cognitive standpoint, how we are feeling while doing the movement, what are the emotions that are associated with, what are the old memories that are associated with it. All of these things, all of these processing happens as this association cortex combines and influence the movement that is coming out as an output. So That's where your secondary sensory system comes into the picture. So what are the secondary sensory system that also plays a very crucial role? As I mentioned, your visual system is a secondary sensory system. Your smelling system is a secondary sensory system. Your audibility is a secondary sensory system. Your vestibular system is a secondary sensory system. So basically, now what we could understand from all of these things is that there is a motor system which is creating a movement, but this motor system is dependent on the sensory system. So sensory system has got a very important role. These systems are controlled in a hierarchical manner as well as the parallel manner. So all the learnings that happens are being processed at these two different levels. Every motor movement that you do again leaves a feedback to the body. These feedbacks are stored in the brain, and these feedbacks will help in the future processing. That's why how a pain sensation gets aggravated every single time and how chronic pain comes into the picture is determined by these theories. How a movement or else a movement pattern is influenced by our previous experiences also determines by this theory. So now let's understand all of these concepts from a real life scenario. Now we discussed about different structures that are involved in designing or planning or execution of our movements, right? Our day-to-day movements. Now let's see how these structures influence our overall day-to-day life. When we talk about pain, when we talk about movement disorders, definitely there is going to be a disturbance in all of these systems, right? So first what we did, we understood how these systems work. Now what will happen when there will be either an injury, or else you can say there will be damage to a structure following repeated strains, or even change in postural patterns, right? So as we mentioned, there are three important things here. Number one is your sensations determines your movement. The second thing, every movement or is the movement that we do leaves a feedback to our brain and is stored in the form of memory, and this memory helps in future processing of the movements. Now let's talk about posture. Many of us know that our posture is the reason behind all the chronic pains, isn't it? The way we sit, the way we stand, the way we walk, or is the way we use our body influence whether we experience pain or not to a lot of extent. So when we started walking, or else when we start learning to walk, there are these patterns which are developed. But over a period of time, when we start using backpacks, when we start using laptops, when we start using telephones, we start altering these patterns. These every alternating patterns is being stored in the form of memory, in the form of muscle memory. These muscle memory then becomes so hardwired that the concept that we spoke about, the synaptic inhibition, starts happening, which means the neurons start inhibiting other areas, and those movement patterns become so embedded within us that it starts feeling normal to us. But they are also something which are damaging our muscles, and that's why whenever there is more damage which is beyond the body's capacity, we start experiencing chronic pain. Similarly, when we have got a neurological disorder or injury on a nerve, let's say a peripheral nerve or its nerve around your hand is injured, right? So all the movement that is being processed in the brain is coming till the nerve, but since the nerve is broken, it is not reaching to the periphery, or else it's not reaching to the right execution of the movement. When that is not happening, the brain is using alternative patterns to finish that task. That's why, let's say if there is a wrist drop and you are not able to lift your wrist, but still you have to pick a stuff, right? So what you will do is you will use some external different mechanism to still pick an object. So let's say if I have gotten wrist drop like this and I am not able to lift my wrist and pick an object, what am I going to do? With my wrist drop itself, I will just try to pick an object. Now imagine when this is the state of my hand always. So the right feedback is not going to the brain. When right feedback is not going to the brain, different memories, okay, this is the new learned pattern now becomes. So even though you recover, you start using your hand in this way. And that's where tricky movement starts coming into the picture. That muscle keeps on getting damaged again and again, and the right muscle is not being used. So the right muscle loses its memory of movement, and the new movement becomes more stronger again and again. And that's why that movement becomes so hardwired that this person will find it very difficult to do the movements in the right way. And that's where all these tricky movements start becoming a habitual pattern, start impacting different systems of the body, and gives us an altered pattern, which is the source of a lot of chronic pain. And that's why it is so important to understand the neuroscience of the pain if we want to fix the pain itself. So the conclusion of this entire thing is that if you want to fix your pain, if you want to fix your posture, if you want to fix your movement pattern, you need to fix it from your central core area. From there, you need to change the neuroscience of the pain itself, because somewhere in the journey, this neuroscience has been altered. So how to fix this? That's where physiotherapy, physical therapy, or else active exercises comes into the picture. Nothing passive is going to change this pattern, but it's only you who are training yourself to relearn the movement will be able to bring changes in your neuroscience system of the body and will be able to fix your problem. So you yourself have this ability to change this altered pattern and to fix your movement patterns, and no other passive modality. And that's why, even though passive physiotherapy is amazing when it comes to your acute injuries, but are not that efficient when it comes to changing your pattern itself, because there your involvement is very necessary. So it's important for you to connect with the right kind of physiotherapist who can understand your movement patterns and can help you out. Now here I would like to just give a quick shout out to our posture corrector program. We have an online program where we provide exercises to you in a way with which you can correct your biomechanics or else your posture completely. This works in a way where first we do an AI based assessment for you. After this AI based assessment, we understand your movement patterns, and based on this movement patterns, we retrain you on doing the right movement patterns. Again, some tips I would like to give you here is, number one, make sure to do deep breathing exercises every single day, because the breathing pattern is the biggest reason why all of these things gets altered. When you are in stress, you do shallow breaths, you don't use your diaphragm well, and that's where your abdominal muscles will not get activated, your core muscles will not get activated, and the right movement patterns will not happen. So make sure to do breathing exercise. You can do deep breathing exercise, also you can do even pranayamas. They are amazing for it. Second thing, try to correct your posture regularly. Whenever you are sitting, make sure that you have some alarms and you change your posture. No posture is right posture. Everybody has got different posture which makes them comfortable. But try to sit in alignment. When you sit in alignment, you are correcting your position, you are correcting your biomechanics, you are correcting your muscle memory, and that's how you are correcting your pain. Third thing, stay physically active. The more physically active you are, the more you are moving your body in different ways, and the more you are retraining your brain to move more and more and more. So say no to sedentary lifestyle, stay physically active, and please take professional help whenever required. So these were my tips, and on that note, I'll end this today's video. I hope this was an informative video. I would love to hear your comments on this, and if you want further guidance, please reach out to us. The link to our website is mentioned in the description box as well as in the card above. On that note, let's meet again in next video. Thank you.